I don't know if you know much about blues or jazz, but that's a little bit of my thing, kind of. And back in the 30s, probably one of the most impressive blues guitarists was a man by the name of Robert Johnson. And the legend is told that Robert Johnson, he walked into a juke joint back when he was about 18 or 19, brought his old beat-up guitar, and he played his blues on his guitar for the folks in the room, and it fell flat. I mean, they laughed him out of the place. And so he left. He got himself a mentor by the name of Ike Zimmerman, and he practiced for hours. And then he came back about a year later, and he was playing at such a higher level that people thought it was impossible that he was the same person. There's no way that he could make that kind of improvement, have that kind of soul acquired in a year's time. In fact, some who knew him beforehand said, it wasn't Robert Johnson, it was somebody who just looked like Robert Johnson. Folks couldn't believe how much better of a blues guitarist Robert had become. He became popular in all the gin mills and juke joints all throughout Mississippi and Louisiana, all the way up into Memphis and so on. And he only recorded, maybe 10 or 12 songs. His three probably best known are Crossroad Blues and Hellhound on My Trail and Terraplane Blues. But his music was influential. Some of the people he inspired, Muddy Waters, B.B. King, a little picker by the name of Eric Clapton, maybe you've heard of him. And he's a long list. And Robert, he died at the age of 27 from mysterious causes. Some say he was poisoned by a jealous husband. Some say it was something else. Some say that the cause had taken place in that year when he was gone. They say that he went to that place where Route 19 and Route 42 intersect, right there in the Mississippi Delta, and that's where Robert Johnson made a deal with the devil at the crossroads. At that crossroads, Robert supposedly offered his soul to be the greatest guitarist alive. The being he met at the crossroads supposedly took Robert's guitar from him, didn't say a word to him, tuned the guitar, and handed it back to him. And with that, the contract was supposedly sealed. Now, the contract was only good for about 5 years. And so Robert Johnson died at the age of 27. Now, some of us may be a little too educated or civilized or refined to hold much stock in that kind of folklore. There's a few people that I know of in Mississippi and Louisiana who aren't that refined. But others prefer their interaction with the evil one to be a little more accidental, a little more unplanned. And we have William Peter Blatty to thank for that. He helped us with an alternate view of how we engage with the devil and how the devil engages with us. He wrote a book in 1971, became a movie in 1973, and it just started a wave. The book and the movie were entitled The Exorcist. The plot is about a 12-year-old girl named Regan who becomes possessed and about how two priests try to help her. It's loosely based on the recordings of an exorcism that took place with a 14-year-old boy in 1949. It took place both at Georgetown University Hospital and then later it finished in St. Louis. With the book and the movie, Blatty seems to have fired the starter's pistol. It didn't hit like another fantasy or even like a horror movie. It created its own whole subgenre of horror films that depicted demonic influence and control and the like. In fact, Religion Journal at the time wrote, academic work has linked the broader exorcist phenomenon to shifts in popular religious imagination in the U.S., including renewed popular attention to demons, demonology, and folk religious themes. It's almost like people woke up to the reality of the demonic. But sadly, they only seem to have woken to the Hollywood version. One of the most important accounts of the devil, of Satan, the evil one, take your pick, entering anyone, comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 13. Verse 26 reads, Jesus responded, "It's the one to whom I give the bread I dip in the bowl." And when he had dipped it, he gave it to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. When Judas had eaten the bread, Satan entered him. Then Jesus told him, "Hurry and do what you're going to do." None of the others at the table knew what Jesus meant. Since Judas was their treasurer, some thought Jesus was telling him to go and pay for the food or to give some money to the poor. So Judas left at once, going out into the night. Now there it is, verse 27. When Judas had eaten the bread, Satan entered him. Then Jesus told him, "Hurry and do what you're going to do." Satan entered him. Now, that's not a generic statement, just so you know. I went back to the Greek and I translated it again just to make certain I totally understood it. And it's just about as direct and specific as it gets. It's not saying that Judas Iscariot was influenced in a concentrated way by his fallen nature, nor is it saying that there was some arbitrary power of evil that we want to personify and call a being named Satan. Instead, it's simple and straightforward. Satan entered into him. And the thing that boggles my mind, and I don't know if you even can wrap your head around this with me or not, but the thing that boggles my mind is that Satan enters him right in front of the Son of God. Right there in front of all of the disciples. In the midst of a worshipful remembrance of God's delivering the children of Israel. It was the Passover meal. And you know what else I noticed? Satan enters Judas. And Jesus is the only one who seems to notice. Jesus immediately says, what you're about to do quickly. But everyone else is like oblivious. I mean, just check out verse 28. None of the others at the table knew what Jesus meant. Since Judas was the treasurer, some thought Jesus was telling him to go and pay for the food or to give some money to the poor. They didn't see any difference in Judas from before Satan entering him and after. And the best they could tell, Jesus was telling him to pop down to the 7-Eleven and get a little more grape juice because they were running low. Thank you. My point is this. When Satan enters Judas, there is no loud music in a minor key. No one's head rotates 360 degrees and nobody spits out green stuff. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some folks for whom it's tragic when Satan or one of his minions attach themselves to them or outright enter them. But this is not the demonic of the Gerasenes. This is not the demonic of the tombs. It's not even the demon-tormented girl from Acts. This is just quiet. It happens to someone who has been with Jesus for 3 years, and sadly, it's complete and it's final. For anyone who's experienced it, you would know that betrayal is an inside job. Always. It's never anybody who you just met or bumped into. A stranger can't betray you. It has to be somebody close to you. It has to be someone that there's a bond with, a commitment to, some sort of trust and relationship. It must have been so hard for Jesus to see it coming, because he did. He saw it coming. He knew the betrayal was going to come, and not only allowed it, but he directed it. He says, what you're about to do quickly. He tells him, get on with it. There's no attempt by Jesus to keep his friend from betraying him. He doesn't try to talk him out of it. Unless you think that Judas was some sort of outlier, that he was some sort of undercover non-believer, listen to what this prophecy in Psalm 41 has to say. Psalm 41, verse 9. Even my best friend, the one I trusted completely, the one who shared my food, has turned against me. Another prophecy in Psalm 55, verse 12. It's not an enemy who taunts me. I can bear that. It's not my foes who so arrogantly insult me. I could have hidden from them. Instead, it's you, my equal, my companion and close friend. And if you still aren't convinced that Jesus was close to Judas and trusted him, bearing in mind that Jesus trusted Judas to be the treasurer and handle the money, even though he had Matthew right there who was more than capable to track the money for them. But yet it's Judas that Jesus trust with their money. And if you still aren't convinced, even with that Jesus and Judas were tight, the disciple that Jesus loved, John, the author of the gospel, he leans back against Jesus and he asks, who's going to betray you? In verse 26, Jesus responded, it's the one to whom I give the bread I dip in the bowl. And when he had dipped it, he gave it to Judas, son of Simon Iscariot. And there are two things you should know from that. The first is this: giving food to another by hand during a meal, it's a sign of intimacy and honor and loyalty. And secondly, since it was the Passover, the bowl he dips the bread into, it was probably a mixture of salt water and bitter herbs. It was intended when you put it in your mouth to remind you of the suffering of the Jews. So Jesus takes this intimate act to remind Judas Iscariot of what they have in common. Their people suffering for all of those years. Yeah. If you just picked up on that, you heard that right. While Judas was in the process of betraying Jesus, Jesus was in the process of demonstrating honor, friendship, and trust to the man who was betraying him. And with that act of friendship and honor, Satan enters Judas, and Judas goes out into the night. In another gospel, Jesus says in Matthew chapter 26, verse 24, "For the Son of Man must die as the Scriptures declared long ago. But how terrible it will be for the one who betrays him. It would be far better for that man if he had never been born." As tragic as all of this is, I need you to understand something. This didn't happen just over the course of a meal. This didn't happen just over the course of one night. This betrayal was a long time in coming. The writer in James chapter 1 says this, and I think it's worth paying attention to. "And remember, when you are being tempted, do not say, 'God is tempting me.' God is never tempted to do wrong, and he never tempts anyone else. Temptation comes from our own desires which entice us and drag us away. These desires give birth to sinful actions, and when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death." In another place, the Apostle Paul in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 27, he warns us, he says, "Don't give the devil a foothold." What happened to Jesus didn't happen at some crossroads in the Delta Blues. What happened to Judas wasn't some supernatural overcoming by some evil power. Don't get me wrong, the scripture is clear that Satan enters him, but the door had to be open. It started in Judas's heart, just like it does with everybody. A long time ago, I was mentoring a lay pastor. The little church he was pastoring was going through some renovations, and it was one of those, like one person kind of deals where the pastor does everything and everyone is content to let the pastor do everything. And he came to me one night. It was kind of late, but he said he really needed to talk. And so we sit down in my office, and he began to explain to me that he had an ATM card for the church. And that he was so busy sometimes that when he would get cash out from the church's account to pay for things for the renovations and those sorts of things, he would forget to put the change in the petty cash. And then it wasn't long before he started losing receipts. And then he would have to estimate how much the church needed to reimburse him when he didn't get this is really going to be like a nightmare for you, okay? So just don't listen to this part, okay? And after he started losing receipts and having to estimate what the reimbursement was, then came the time when he started borrowing from the church account because he was strapped and they weren't paying him hardly anything. And he was just going to borrow the money until he got to payday. And then, of course, he was going to pay it back. But then it just kind of snowballed from there. He had every intention of paying it back, and I believe him that he did. And then he started drinking more because of the pressure of pastoring and the renovation project and all these other things. And then he started taking money from the church's account so he could hide from his wife how much money he was spending on drinking. By the time he came to see me that night, best we figured he he took about $40,000 from the church. And I knew this guy. It's not how he started out. I can tell you, he wanted to be a good pastor. He really did. He wanted to do it right. He wanted to pastor his church well. He wanted to impact his community. He wanted to do it right. I guess no one told him that every decision matters. Every compromise is just one step closer to the ledge. And thankfully for him, before he went all the way, he reached out to a friend and he asked for help. And for Judas, I guess he just kept opening that door and opening that door. He went past one compromise after another, until Satan didn't have to push his way in. He just strolled right on in. Somehow in that moment, when Jesus showed him honor and friendship, Judas opened himself the whole way and Satan walked in. And Judas walked out into the night. I'm not smart enough to know when my sin is because of my own sinful desires and when it's influenced by the evil one or one of his minions. And I can tell you this, there probably have been plenty of times when I didn't give the evil one enough credit. And there probably have been times when I've blamed him and I shouldn't have. But the way that the evil one or one of his minions gets attached to any one of us is by us opening the door. It's by our tolerance for sin. It's the more you and me get comfortable with those things that we've just kind of said don't really matter, our tolerance increases. And so then there's going to be a time when the door is wide open and we didn't even know it. And by that time, we will have minimized things or recidivized things or reduced things in such a way that nobody can even just walk up and tell us we're in trouble because we don't want to hear it. We've deceived ourselves for so long. And if anything that this passage should tell us, it's that there's no place called sacred ground. The church will not protect you from Satan or his minions. It happened to Judas, and he was standing in front of Jesus. And so the best that you and I can do is not to fail to understand the gravity. See, sometimes what happens is we just get it in our head, it's okay if I sin because I can just ask the Lord to forgive me and he will, which is absolutely right. He can forgive you. But the part that we sometimes miss out on is James chapter 1, verse 15. These desires give birth to sinful actions, and when sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. It will kill you. And it may not kill your life. It may destroy your relationship with someone you love deeply. It may destroy your relationship with God. It may hamper your ability to be used by God. When sin is allowed to grow, it gives birth to death. You and me, We need to lower our tolerance of sin and ask the Holy Spirit of God to rid us of any evil influences, whether they come from inside me or outside of me. And there's one more thing. And this is really important. You can't take the rest of the message seriously unless you hear me in this one point. While Judas was busy betraying Jesus, Jesus was busy reaching out to him in friendship, in showing him honor, and in trusting him. And if Jesus would do that for the one that betrays him and brings about his crucifixion, what do you suppose he would do for you and me if we just stop in our tracks and look to him? He's already reaching out in friendship with honor and trust. And I hope you guys think about that, all right?